So everyone likes Chinese food, but as first-generation immigrants that grew up in Canada eating a traditional Chinese diet, we are actually a little bit conflicted about the traditional Chinese culture when it comes to our health and well-being. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Alice, this is my husband and Kevin, and together we've lost over 60 pounds together on our keto carnivore journey. Today we're going to share our experience with traditional Chinese food culture and why we no longer eat the foods that we used to eat when we were growing up.
We want to preface this discussion by saying that we grew up in an environment where food was always available to us and that our parents worked extremely hard to always have food on the table. I do believe that many unhealthy or suboptimal food habits are passed down from generation to generation and that they were doing the best with the information that they had. The recommendations for diet are always changing and have been for thousands of years. Keto, low carb, and carnivore space is relatively new, and we are thankful that we are able to raise future generations with this knowledge that we've used to improve our own health. The theme of good health is always intermingled in the way we ate growing up, and a lot of traditional Chinese medicine was usually incorporated in our diet, especially in the form of soups. Another thing that we're extremely grateful for is that meat and protein was always included in the meals, even though they might not have been the significant portion, but they were usually mixed with things that might have not been the most healthy.
Okay, moving on to reason number one, and that is rice and noodles. Now, I don't think it's a secret, but Chinese food is very high in carbs. We Chinese people just like to eat a lot of things like rice, noodles, and buns, and there is often very little emphasis on protein. At every meal, it's very common for half or 3/4 of your plate to be rice or noodles. Unlike Western culture, where it's common to have dishes like steak or beef tenderloin, prime rib, where you get to eat half a plate of meat, this usually doesn't happen in Chinese culture. This could be partially due to the fact that meat is quite expensive, and as first-generation immigrants, it's all about stretching your dollar to its maximum benefit. So when we were growing up, eating as a family, everyone would get a bowl of rice, and we would basically share any meat or veggie dishes as a table. And whenever we went out to eat Chinese food, rice or noodles was usually the base for a majority of dishes, and then there may be some sprinkles of protein in there. For example, like chicken chow mein, it's mostly chow mein with a little bit of chicken. And because rice and noodles are just so palatable, it's actually quite addicting to eat this way and to continue eating this way. And if you don't know any better, there's kind of no reason to stop, I guess.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I could actually eat 2 big bowls of rice myself for dinner every night, never knowing at the time that it could potentially create like things like carb addiction and health problems for me later in life.
Those big bowls are always like encouraged. Go back and get more rice.
Yeah, go back and get more rice.
Yeah. It was impressive.
Yeah, it was impressive that you could eat that much rice. I also remember growing up, my mom told me that if I didn't eat rice, my brain wouldn't have enough oxygen. And that's just the way that the Chinese culture operates, and that's how people think. And yeah, if you didn't eat rice, you would feel really sluggish and uncomfortable, which is really just carb withdrawal in hindsight. Really doing keto for as long as we've been doing, we've realized that our brains are just fine without eating rice. Things like rice and noodles are just pure starch and have very little nutrition. It's basically just a filler food that expands in your stomach to make you retain water, giving you that full or bloated feeling. I remember as a kid, I used to eat instant noodles every day after school as a snack, and that's basically just a bag of processed chemicals.
Funny thing is, like, we would eat instant noodles, but then we were told not to drink the soup. So
yeah, yeah.
The noodles were okay.
The noodles were okay. The noodles are actually not okay. Yeah. If you look at the ingredients of a pack of instant noodles, it's just
pretty scary.
We don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
It's not real.
They taste amazing.
They taste amazing, oh yeah.
And reason number 2 is that Chinese food contains a lot of seed oils or vegetable oils, especially when you get them from restaurants. Now in our channel, we talk about how we should not be scared of fat, but it's the source of fat that's very important. Now I've learned that through just talking with my mom that when she was growing up, seed oils are actually quite rare. When they cook, they primarily use lard. I believe it's much more common now just because of the cost effectiveness, especially for restaurants which are profit oriented. One common cooking technique is the wok fry or the stir fry, in which you cook a bunch of meat or vegetables at very high heat in a large wok. It's very tasty because you're cooking at high heat and it leads to great flavor, but the amount of seed oil you need to achieve that flavor is a lot. 99% of the time, the oil they use is vegetable oil or canola oil, and that's how they achieve that great flavor. Now, hundreds of years ago, before seed oils became so commercialized, the primary cooking oil was lard. But over time, the modern trend has shifted towards things more like canola oil, soybean oil, or different types of vegetable oils because they're more readily available and cost effective.
Yeah, I know Chinese restaurants, they just buy big tubs of canola oil, vegetable oil. Yeah. They can go through like a couple tubs a day.
Yeah, and constantly refrying stuff in the same oil.
Yeah, they do reuse oil to refry things.
There's definitely no concept of things like avocado oil or coconut oil being used in cooking, let alone things like beef fat or tallow.
generally beef fat is more expensive than things like vegetable oils as well, so.
Another common cooking technique is deep frying. Now, deep frying obviously isn't just limited to Chinese foods. If you've been to restaurants like Panda Express or any other type of Chinese takeout food, deep fried is a primary cooking technique because it's the fastest way to serve food. And before deep frying, it's usually coated in things like cornstarch, potato starch, or flour in order to get that deep fried, crunchy texture and taste. And it also preserves it for a long time.
Yeah, you can bake a piece of chicken for 30 minutes or you can deep fry it for 5 minutes. If you're a restaurant, obviously you want that max turnover.
Yeah, and you can leave that food on the hot plate for a while without it spoiling.
Reason number 3, and that is because there is a cheap eat / street food culture in Asian countries. Now, Asian food in general promotes a lot of eating out and cheap eats and street food culture. So in Asia, and especially in Hong Kong, which is where our parents are from, a part of the corporate work culture there is to actually eat out with coworkers and friends after work. Now, people in Hong Kong are known to work hard, play hard, and because living conditions there are usually very cramped, it's actually more common for people to eat out than it is to cook dinner at home. There are so many cheap eat options and like street food available. It's so popular in Hong Kong that it's actually cheaper to eat out than it is to cook for yourself. Groceries, fresh produce, healthy foods in Asian countries in general are actually very expensive. And when you are constantly eating out, eating deep fried food, eating stir-fried foods that are coated in seed oils, just as we mentioned earlier, it is just not good for your health in the long term. Now, we actually grew up eating Chinese bakery buns and Hong Kong style breakfast for breakfast and lunch. If you've never had Chinese bakery buns before, they are very, very tasty. They have this like shiny glaze on the outside and usually some sort of savory meat filling on the inside for the savory option. And then there's also sweet options like pineapple buns and cocktail buns, which are filled with a sugary coconut filling, which is basically the American equivalent of Dunkin' Donuts and Tim Hortons. I remember when we traveled to Hong Kong, we would always grab buns on the go because they were very cheap, like less than $1 each, and very filling. And then we'd eat at HK style cafes, which are notoriously unhealthy. Usually Hong Kong style cafe breakfasts are things like macaroni, instant noodles, pineapple buns, milk tea, lemon tea, which has a lot of sugar. Don't get me wrong, these things are very, very tasty. They're very palatable, almost addicting, but absolutely terrible for your health. Not to mention that you're basically ravenous again in a few hours because of the blood sugar roller coaster that you're on.
Yeah.
Now, growing up in Canada, dim sum is something that's very popular and it's a social way of having brunch with family and friends. Dim sum is when you have a large range of small-sized snack dishes that everyone shares on the table. Funny story, but we actually had a meal of dim sum with our family probably almost a year ago, and at the time I was wearing a CGM just because we were testing out our blood sugar levels and stuff.
Continuous glucose monitor.
Yeah. And my blood sugar actually spiked to over 8.0 after that meal, even though we were intentionally avoiding carbs. So I didn't actually eat any rice or noodles and that meal, but
you even peeled off the dumpling skins from the dumpling.
Yeah, I did. I
so
was
it's just the
trying
protein
to be,
inside,
quote unquote, like as keto as possible. And I thought I was really just eating protein. But the problem is that a lot of these dishes are actually cut with cornstarch, potato starch, flour, and other sorts of things, as well as the oils that can spike your blood sugar. You think you're eating a shrimp meatball or a beef meatball, but it really has been cut with so much starch, and there's basically just a ton of hidden carbs in that meatball.
Reason number 4 is the amount of sugar that's used in Chinese cooking. Now, we've talked about this on our channel before, but it's very common in Chinese culture, or especially in Chinese restaurant foods, for them to use a little bit of sugar just in order to balance out the soy or umami flavors in the dish. Almost every recipe that has soy sauce also has sugar in it. When you eat savory dishes that have a little bit of sugar in it, it makes that dish more palatable and makes you want to come back for more. But it's that small amount of sugar that is actually very dangerous because it trains your taste buds to want more and more sugar. And I think people in today's society are consuming more and more sugar unknowingly. So many different types of restaurants are adding it to savory foods. They don't realize that that tastiness that restaurant food is giving them is actually coming from the additional sugar that's being added to the foods. Reason number 5 is that Chinese people love eating fruit. Now, I know that fruit consumption is controversial in the carnivore and keto space.
Well, in keto, it's technically not even allowed unless you're under 50 grams.
Yeah, exactly. But when we were growing up, it was very common to eat a bowl of fruit for breakfast, a bowl of fruit with lunch, and then a bowl of fruit with dinner as dessert.
At some point, I was actually able to eat half of a watermelon in one sitting by myself. I don't even know how much sugar is in half of a watermelon, but probably at least 150, 200 grams.
Yeah.
Watermelon is just pure sugar. It's very good.
Now, it's not that fruit doesn't have nutrients, but when you're consuming that much fruit, it's just more and more sugar that you're ingesting into your body. Psychologically, you think that it's healthy, and there are some health benefits, but it's just way too much sugar to consume on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's very easy to overdo and end up eating like 300 grams a day of just sugar.
Yeah. And part of it is because you're convincing yourself that it's healthy.
It's healthy, so you eat more sugar, and then you think it's healthy, and then you eat more sugar, and then it just turns into this thing where you can't stop eating fruit.
That's just a learned behavior that...
It is a learned behavior.
That it's very common in the Chinese culture.
Yeah.
Even now today, when I pass on fruit from something that our family gives us, I always get a weird look.
We really just stick to low sugar berries. We've experimented with higher sugar fruits before, like mangoes, papaya, stuff like that. Bananas. But we found that it just keeps triggering that sweet tooth over and over again. There's just no reason to consume fruit other than the fact that it tastes good.
Once we started adding some more fruit back into our diet after being keto or carnivore for so long,
we got lax with other things.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
You kind of go down a slippery slope.
All of a sudden I was up another 10, 15 pounds and I didn't realize how.
Yeah.
And we weren't eating a ton, just a little bit, but it grows over time and you don't, something to watch out for.
Reason number 6, that is Chinese food contains a lot of other ingredients that just don't serve us, especially in processed foods. So these are things like MSG, monosodium glutamate, soy sauce, cornstarch, potato starch, and probably a whole bunch of other things that we don't know how to pronounce or don't know what is. Now, some of the ingredients that I just mentioned are very common ingredients in Chinese cooking, and they really just don't serve us and are not good for us, especially in processed foods and restaurant foods. So things like MSG, which is just very highly addictive and basically in every single restaurant dish, whether MSG is sprinkled directly in the food or used in the sauces that are used to season the food. And once one restaurant does it, another restaurant has to do it to compete, and it just turns into this thing where now all restaurants and all processed Chinese food needs to have MSG in it because we've gotten used to that taste in our mouth.
And the sauces that they commonly use are things like black bean sauce, oyster sauce.
They all have MSG.
Hoisin sauce.
Sugar. Hoisin sauce has sugar.
Yeah, they add it to the stir fries to make the food taste good and have the umami, but there is MSG in them as well, even though they don't add sprinkles of it.
Same with chicken bouillon powder.
Yeah,
that's beef bouillon powder. That's a very common way for restaurants to slip MSG.
Yeah, like they'll serve stir-fried vegetables, which you think are pretty benign, but they'll put spoons of bouillon powders in them that contain MSG.
And then it's also cooked in seed oil as well. So your stir-fry veggies aren't actually healthy.
No.
It's also very common to coat meats in cornstarch and potato starch, which gives it that like slippery tenderness.
Yeah, that mouthfeel.
That mouthfeel that you get in stir-fry foods. And it's also used as a coating, like we mentioned earlier, before deep frying, because it also helps give that deep fried mouthfeel. A lot of common Chinese foods are also very high in soy, like tofu, just the use of soy sauce, which is basically a staple in every Chinese dish. Now, there are some healthier alternatives nowadays that you can get at places like health food stores, like Whole Foods, such as coconut aminos, but they just don't offer that sort of like same addictive umami taste. And really, if you think about it, there is no reason for the food that we eat to contain all these sorts of ingredients. The purpose of them being added is just to improve the palatability of the food, which makes us want to go back and eat more. And once one restaurant or food company starts adding these ingredients to their food, then people get hooked and everyone else needs to do it to catch up. When you're used to eating out so much and you cook at home, you think that the food that you're cooking at home actually tastes bland or plain. It just doesn't have that like restaurant taste. It's because they're adding extra things in it to make you want to go back and make you not want to eat at home.
Yeah, it's just the way that the chefs are just trained to cook. That's all they've known, right?
It's just how things have evolved over time, I guess.
So the last thing we want to talk about is whether Chinese food is all bad. Now, we've given a lot of reasons why Chinese food can be unhealthy, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. If Chinese food is home cooked and you use more optimal ingredients, it can definitely be healthier than a lot of other options out there. Now, most of the side dishes that accompany rice can be made lower carb and consist primarily of meat and vegetables. We also minimize the amount of soy products that we ingested as well. Actually, when transitioning to keto, I basically just took the rice bowl I normally eat and cut it in half, and then I would cut it in half again a couple weeks later and cut it in half, and eventually it just kind of eliminated altogether.
Yeah, and it definitely took some time to be able to cut down mentally, I guess, because remember, we grew up thinking that rice equals oxygen to our brain.
Yeah, and I would get a lot of weird looks from our family.
They're like mind blown. Even though it's been a couple of years, they still don't understand how we don't eat rice or noodles or bread. And that is just the addictive nature. that you don't realize you're in.
I personally have omitted a lot of the vegetables out of my diet just because of the impact it has on my digestion. I still believe Chinese cooking techniques can still be healthy as long as more optimal ingredients are used.
When it comes to dealing with family and friends, diet can be kind of a controversial topic and it can be a touchy subject. So let us know in the comments down below if you want us to make a video topic about this in the future, how we approach our diet when it comes to social situations with family and friends. I think it's a little bit ironic because a lot of people think that Chinese people are actually very healthy because we are relatively lean compared to other counterparts in the world. But I think that that can be a little bit deceiving because skinny doesn't necessarily mean healthy. If you've ever heard of the term skinny fat, which means that a person has high proportions of visceral fat or fat surrounding the organs compared to subcutaneous fat, which is fat underneath the skin, I think that's kind of the case with a lot of Asian people.
Yeah, I don't really like the term skinny fat, but it's just the easiest way to describe it.
Visceral fat can be even more dangerous than subcutaneous fat, and it can lead to all sorts of health issues. And honestly, maybe a part of this is just genetics. It's just the way that we're like built, kind of like how Asian people have smaller statures compared to Western counterparts. Another thing to note is that there is a lot of walking in Asia compared to North America. So maybe the average person gets a little bit more daily physical activity compared to North America, where I think being sedentary is more common. When you're in Asia, you can walk for literally 5-6 hours a day getting from places to places, just because of how dense cities are and how sophisticated transportation is.
And when we went, this was about three years ago now,
Yeah.
we were eating a lot of unhealthy foods, but because we were actually walking so much, when we came back, we lost weight. Which
Yeah,
was,
we didn't gain any weight.
Yeah.
We went to Hong Kong.
We didn't feel the greatest.
Yeah.
But we lost weight.
Yeah, we actually got skinnier. We were eating so much, but we were also walking so much.
Yeah.
Like here in North America, there's no way you could walk 5 or 6 hours a day. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
It is very common for people of Asian culture to have cholesterol issues that require statins or require insulin shots for diabetes while still looking relatively skinnier to their Western counterparts. It's happened to a lot of people that we know. And I know that before we were able to discover this low carb lifestyle, we were kind of both eating our way towards having these issues, I guess. And a lot of the times, these sort of health issues don't really show up until you're in your like 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
When you're young, you can actually eat that sort of lifestyle and get away from it for a very long time without seeing the impact.
Now, if you liked our video today, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you're updated whenever we post a new video. Let us know in the comments down below if your culture has any impact on your diet and how you ate growing up.
Until next time.